Hi, and welcome to Celebration Bar Review. We're continuing our countdown of the top 10 myths around the bar exam, and I thought today it might be appropriate. As I'm recording this message, my daughter is taking one of her finals at the University of Virginia Law School. Good luck to her and to her classmates. As I talked to Megan about her finals, I was surprised and struck at sort of the recollection as I walked back through law school, which has been a very interesting experience, I must say. At the difference between a law school exam and the bar exam. I mean, I know it intellectually, but it was a very different visceral sort of thing to actually experience what it's like for a student to prepare for a law school final. And so it brings to mind number 4 in our countdown of the top 10 myths. And myth number 4 today is what worked in law school will work on the bar exam. Now, let me explain why that myth can be so dangerous. If you were successful in law school, and by definition you graduated, you were successful, it's normal and natural to say, well, I'll just keep doing what worked for me for the last 3 or 4 years, and I'll apply that to the bar exam, and then I'll be successful as well. But you know, interestingly enough, some of the best law schools in the country have some of the worst bar pass rates because their students really can't make the adjustment from the intellectual environment of a law school exam to the more practical environment of the bar exam. Now, I'm not suggesting that a bar exam doesn't require any intellectual skill, but it requires different skills than you needed in a law school test. Let me give you some idea of why that might be so. First of all, in law school, you only have a single audience. You have the professor who is teaching the class. That's the person that gave you all of the information, and that's the person that, theoretically at least, is going to be grading your final exam or your midterm, whatever it might be. Now, it's very easy when you've got a single audience and it's someone you've been talking to for 18 weeks or longer to get a sense of what's important to them. If you were in my class, you would learn very quickly that I'm very much focused on facts and arguments and not so much on memorizing law. And so if you memorized law or gave me a lot of case names, you wouldn't get much credit for it. That's a pretty easy call to make. By extension, you might have a professor that says every day in class, I don't care about the facts, just cite the law, give me the statute number. Okay, that's what they want. And you create your outlines and you prepare accordingly and you write your exams accordingly. But the bar exam is very different than that. The bar exam is graded by a number of people, almost always anonymously, and it's set up on a calibrated system so that you have really no particular preference from one reader to the next, and the nature of even one essay to the next could be very different depending on the state that you're in. So as a result, you don't necessarily know what that particular grader or reader wants. Now you might say, well, I've listened to what the bar examiners say they want, or I took a class from somebody that was a bar review reader or a bar exam reader, like that's some big deal. The problem there, again, is that oftentimes what the examiners talk about is obtuse. It's not entirely clear how one would give them what they want. And it's too easy to become literal when they say, don't repeat the facts, then you never use the facts. That would be a mistake. So finding your audience is much more difficult, and you really need to trust your bar review when it comes to that. So that's the first difference, it seems to me, between law school and the bar exam. A second huge difference in my mind is that in law school you spend an entire semester or longer studying that one subject. You now have a test that will focus just on that one subject and the detail that comes with spending 18 weeks or more learning the subject. That requires a level of proficiency and expertise and develops a deeper level of understanding of a subject than the bar exam ever tests. Remember that at most a bar essay would be a 1-hour question out of 3 or 6 or 12 if it's half-hour questions. And so by definition, it can't go in as much depth. It therefore does not require the expertise, but instead it's a proficiency exam. It's a competence exam. Do you understand the basics of the subject? Now, what that means in terms of how to write an answer is that you're not going to be expected to cite case names or statute numbers. You're not going to be asked to look at all of the distinct possibilities. You just simply don't have time to do that. And indeed, it's not uncommon to get an essay that goes over multiple subjects in one question. So you're giving even less attention to that one specific subject. So instead of a single-minded focus that you would have in a law school exam, in a bar exam you've got to take a much broader, above the trees, if you will, view of what's going on. I think that leads to a different way to prepare as well. in law school, and particularly as I watched my daughter put together her outlines. I mean, these are extensive, massive outlines, and I was thinking to myself, God, what do you need all these outlines for? And then I realized that in law school, oftentimes, you can bring your outline with you because you've got a 3 or 4 or 5 hour test. And that's my third difference. On the bar exam, you don't get to bring the books in with you. It's not a 3 or 4 or 5 hour test on that subject. It's part of a larger exam, but having a big long outline won't do you any good because you can't bring it into the room with you. Now, I do know that there's a wide body of thought that says making the outline is useful. And I think to a very limited degree on the bar, that's true. It helps you condense or coalesce or bring information together. But truthfully, I'm not one of those people that subscribes to the write it all down, repeat it all, create massive outlines, and then reduce your outlines, and then reduce your outlines to note cards. It's a lot of busy work. And frankly, it's busy work that's given in some bar reviews just to keep students off the providers' backs. I don't think it's a useful explanation of how to learn, and so we don't utilize that specifically in our course. Now, does that mean you shouldn't do it in law school? Absolutely not. But in law school, you're trying to focus in on just a single topic and more time and more focus. The last difference I think that I would note between a law school exam and the bar exam is that in law school, you're really working for class rank, particularly if you're at an ambitious school. You're trying to get a great score so you get a great job or a clerkship or whatever it might be, or you book the class, or you just want to show that you're at least as smart as all those other bright people in the room. And that's all well and good. And oftentimes sitting together with other members of a study group and trying to put together your outlines and preparing and try and practice questions from that professor and working through those are great ways to prepare for a law school exam. Well, what about doing the same thing for preparing for the bar? Well, even though our business originally was called the Study Group, which was the name that my wife Sarah came up with because I spent so much time with my study group when I was in law school, the reality is that in the bar review, as we see it, it's a pretty dangerous thing to do. Your study group friends are essentially neurotic at this point. We love them, you love them, but really they're not the people you want on your Facebook best friends list or your MySpace pages. You don't want to be twittering them, what are you studying right now? Because the anxiety level tends to build and grow. I distinctly remember that my study group got pretty anxious before exams. It was interesting to watch my daughter. She says her group stayed pretty calm, and maybe that's a difference over 20 or 30 years of people just being more prepared for these tests. But the reality is that when you spend time with other people preparing for the bar exam, frankly, none of you know enough about the subject to be competent. You don't know enough about taking a bar to be really competent. And in a lot of courses, there's simply no one there to help you or guide you or sort of moderate the craziness. So that if you're studying with other people, it tends to escalate, and your craziness feeds their craziness, and their craziness feeds yours, and it's an unending cycle that can spiral into total insanity before the exam. That's why I recommend to my students that they study on their own and they stay in touch with us. We've been through this a lot of times. We know what the exam is. We know when you should be upset and when you shouldn't. And we're able to keep our students' emotions and focus, I think, in better check and better able to help them and be productive instead of just being needless energy and worry. So to my mind, there are a number of differences between law school exams and the bar exam. In the bar exam, you don't have to get the highest score. All you got to do is pass. It's a proficiency competency test. It does not require expertise. It does not require in-depth studying on any one subject. It's a generalized test. That's very different than one class, one subject, one reader, one group of people all working together that you find in a law school environment. Now, can the skills that you learned in law school help you in the bar exam? Sure they can. Learning to analyze and think like a lawyer, to make arguments, to work through and use the law as you understand it. Those are all very good skills, and they should be used in the bar. But don't confuse the bar with your law school tests. They're two very different kinds of evaluations. They're done by different people for different reasons, and that's why this is such a dangerous myth. Well, I hope this is helpful. Good luck to those of you in your finals right now. If you have comments, as always, I invite you to call me or to email me. And I wish you a very happy finals season, wherever you may be. And we'll talk to you again next time as we continue our countdown and we head to the top 3 on our bar exam myths. Thanks.